Hello, and welcome to Community Forum presented by the Rhode Island Developmental Disabilities Council. My name is Kevin Nerney. I'm the Executive Director of the Council and host of this program. Our goal is to share news, information, and insight about topics that are important to people with developmental disabilities. Advocacy and education is a primary mission of ours, and so we're glad to have the ability to expand our reach to the community in the state and beyond. Today's topic is voting. What is new and what do you need to know before the next election? Our guests today are Representative Katherine Kazarian, House District 63, representing East Providence and Pawtucket. She's also the House Majority Whip. Also today with us is Kate Bowden, Senior Attorney at Disability Rights Rhode Island. Welcome. Kate, can we start with you? Could you tell us about yourself, what you do at Disability Rights Rhode Island, and what the mission of Disability Rights Rhode Island is?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I am at Disability Rights Rhode Island. We are a part of a national network of agencies called Protection and Advocacy Agencies. And we're federally funded, and we focus on the civil rights of people with disabilities. So there are lots of activities that we engage in. We have a number of different grants, and I head up our voting-related grant. So the mission really at Disability Rights Rhode Island is to ensure that people with differing abilities exercise their human and civil rights and have inclusion in society.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about what your focus is when it comes to voting?
Yes, so with voting, we are focused on voter education. We assist voters with disabilities to understand what their voting rights are, how to participate in voting. So I go into schools and different facilities and work with voters with disabilities to make sure that they are comfortable and engaged in the process. We also educate policymakers around laws or practices that might make it more difficult for people with disabilities to vote. Some of the barriers that we have identified over the years have actually been corrected by the Let Rhode Island Vote Act that we will hear about. And so we educate policymakers about barriers to voting, and we also work on accessible voting, advocating that polling places are accessible, that people can get in and out of them, and also that voting systems such as mail ballot voting or the technology in the polling places are accessible for people with disabilities. So those are some of the focuses. Okay,
great. So one of the interesting things that you brought up was the Let Rhode Island Vote Act. And Representative Kazarian, you were heavily involved in that piece of legislation.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the Let Rhode Island Vote Act came about?
Absolutely. So in 2020, we all remember the pandemic. And the legislature wanted to make sure that people were able to vote during the 2020 election in a safe way, in a way that wouldn't scare people from voting or spread the disease. So what we did was we allowed people to vote early in person without an excuse. We also allowed people to vote by mail without an excuse. And what we saw was a really great result. Over 500,000 Rhode Islanders ended up voting in the 2020 election. And over 60% of the people that did vote in that election voted either early in person or by mail. So the statistics showed that people really liked being able to choose the way that they would vote in the election. And then personally, one-on-one, I heard from countless constituents who kept telling me how happy they were that they were able to choose how they wanted to vote in the election. They weren't just waiting for primary day to come around or general election day to come around and think, oh gosh, I forgot to vote, or I forgot to take time off of work to get out to vote. Oh, I'm having an issue with my children, I can't make it to the polls. So it really helped them make their plan to vote, and then make sure that they partook in the process.
That's great. I can say, just for myself personally, that early voting was so fantastic. I could do it on my way to work, just stop by the town hall. Everybody that I saw in the town hall at the time, it was quick and easy because you didn't have long lines, because it wasn't a single day. And I know myself, I'm always a little wary of new things, like when we got rid of the stoplight in town and put a rotary in instead. But then you get to experience it, and it's so much easier. And it was like, oh, well, this is fantastic.
I think it's the Rhode Island way. We all get a little nervous when things change, but it's for the good, and I'm glad glad people liked it.
I certainly did.
Good.
So can we talk about what some of, and I don't want to call them new provisions, because like you said, it was actually just a continuation of the previous election, the previous couple of years. So what are some of the provisions in the Let Rhode Island Vote Act?
Sure, and some of them are a little bit new. We were able to work with people like Kate to make sure that we were putting the best possible bill forward. So a couple of the provisions are removing the witness and notary requirements. So if you voted by mail, you used to have to get 2 witnesses to sign on to your mail ballot application, or go out and have a notary notarize your signature. We did away with that process. It wasn't adding to the security of our elections. It was frankly just making it harder for people to vote, so we removed it. The second thing that we did is we made those mail ballot drop boxes permanent. So every city and town has a mail ballot drop box located in front of their city hall or town hall. All of them are under 24-hour surveillance, so they are protected, they are safe. As Kate reminded me right before we started, you can also bring your mail ballots to the polling place. So if you forget to submit it, you can always bring it on election day.
So it's a mail ballot, but you can actually, you don't have to mail it, you can actually take it directly to the polling place and just put it right in the machine?
That's correct. Just or bring it to the poll workers, and they will help make sure that your ballot is collected properly, so it'll be counted.
I would just add on that
Sure.
if you're bringing a mail ballot to the polling place, it still needs to be in its proper envelopes that you received.
Okay.
So, the envelope that you sign your name and then you enclose it in another, it has to be in that. So it's really for those voters who, like myself, applied for a mail ballot and then didn't get enough time to get back through the mail. You can drop it off at the polling place as long as it's in its envelopes.
Okay, that's good to know. And important, because if you just show up with the ballot, it won't be accepted. It's got to be in the envelope with the signature.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great point. A couple other things that it did is if you wanted to vote early in person at City Hall, or you wanted to vote by mail, you used to have an excuse, and you used to have to sign under penalty and perjury of law that you really couldn't be there on election day. We did away with that. Like I said, again, we want to encourage voter participation. We want people to make a plan to vote, and that really hindered people's ability to do that. One last thing I do want to add is that we did help make our elections more secure by requiring our Secretary of State to clean up the voter rolls 4 times a year. So that way, we figured the best way to keep our elections secure is make sure that the polls or the voter books contain actual voters. So cleaning it up 4 times a year does add to the security of our elections.
I just want to go back to the signature requirements, because we, Kate and I both operate in the developmental disability community, and for a lot of people, it would interfere with their ability to keep their ballot secret. Because they have to invite people in to witness, not necessarily the ballot, but they're there for the whole, not the whole process, but they're there for a part of the process, and that can make the process less secure for them, or at least less, what's the word I'm looking for?
Comfortable?
Private.
Yeah,
and independent.
confidential.
Confidential, there we go.
And so that was really important to a lot of people in our community, and I think they really appreciated that. The other thing about drop boxes and early voting and all of that is, again, a lot of people with disabilities are reliant on other people for transportation. So if it's only election day and their support staff is out, if their transportation is out, that's it, they're done. There's no way for them to exercise their right to vote. So a lot of these methods and methodologies to vote really increase the ability of a lot of Rhode Islanders to be able to exercise that right. And I know that they were really appreciative of it. And so I just want to say, well, thank you. But just point out how many people actually took advantage. And I know a lot of people did come to testify on behalf of this. A lot of people that are on the council testified on it. You mentioned the cleaning of the rolls. Can you talk a little bit more about that, what that is? And
Yeah, absolutely. So we used the national change of address data. We also used from the Office of Vital Statistics, the deceased list. I'm not remembering the exact title of it, but it's what our State Department uses when people pass away. So we use both of those to go through the voter rolls and again, make sure that 4 times a year, people who are either no longer with us or have maybe moved out of the state are no longer on the appearing on the voter rolls. This was actually an issue, again, another constituent had mentioned to me once, his daughter had moved away, she hadn't lived in Rhode Island in several years, and yet she was still on the voter list. So it's to get to that issue, really make sure we're removing people who don't live here anymore.
Does that include people who move from one town to another, like one voting precinct to another, or one town to another, or one district to another?
So we're usually pretty good about making sure that people who move within the state are their voter rolls are being updated. Okay. Usually because the voter themselves is make sure that they go in, change their address, and.
So I can just say for myself,
really?
When I moved from North Providence to Gloucester, which is where I live now.
Yeah.
I registered to vote in Gloucester. I never went back to North Providence
to
say,
remove?
hey, please take me off the
okay.
voter. So I'm just wondering how that's a easier process if it's in the state than if it's out of state or a death. Okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of that.
No,
it's
okay.
good to learn.
But yeah, it's just really to make sure that again, those voter rolls are reflecting who's actually live here, who can actually vote here. That's really the most secure way we can run our elections.
And I know there was one other issue in that act about Braille and Braille ballots.
Yep, that's absolutely right. So prior to passing the Let Rhode Island Vote Act, people who wanted a Braille ballot used to have to request one 45 days before an election. 45 days before an election. I mean, we're talking over a month they had to make sure they remembered to request a Braille ballot. Now, by passing the Let Rhode Island Vote Act, it's 21 days. So we moved that timeline up or down for them, up for them, I don't know how to say it, making it so that 21 days before an election, they just have to make sure they do it 21 days before an election, they ask for that Braille ballot. So.
That was a great thing, and I want to give a shout out to Steve Brown at the ACLU, because I do believe a lot of the advocates were getting together during COVID to ask ourselves, how is this election going to work and how can it be easier? And a lot of people, including the ACLU and Common Cause, came together to identify things. And I believe the Braille deadline was brought up by Steve Brown.
Oh yeah, and we had some great people come and testify about that at the hearing. I have to say, my favorite thing about this bill is how many people came together and worked on it to make sure it really was, we were putting our best product forward. I have to give our NEA a shout out, SERU, Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence. I mean, groups that you would, not think voting rights is really their main thing, were coming to make sure that this bill was the best it could be and that it would pass. So it was great to see.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Kate, back to you. Those are some kind of new things, not so new things, but recently new, I guess.
Yeah.
At the very least, to expect in this upcoming election. Is there anything else that we can expect that's going to be new in the upcoming election?
Yes, there's some exciting news in Rhode Island. The federal law, the Help America Vote Act, requires that there be accessible voting systems in every polling place. And that means there has to be some technology that would allow a voter who is blind or has other disabilities to be able to vote privately and independently. And that law has been in place since 2004, I believe. We had a machine in Rhode Island called the Automark for many years. Our fleet of Automark machines came to the end of its useful life, and Rhode Island replaced the Automark with a machine called the Express Vote. So the Express Vote is the new machine in Rhode Island to enable voters to vote privately and independently. And basically, there are headphones, and a voter can have the ballot read to them, and the machine marks the ballot for the voter. It then prints out a ballot that looks a little different from the typical ballot. It's important for all voters, but especially voters who use this technology, to really look at the ballot and verify that it's printing out the way they want. And then the ballot gets put into a ballot counting machine, just like all the other voters use. So this is great technology for someone who would have difficulty filling in that little bubble, vision issues, reading challenges. Anyone can use the technology, but it was designed for people with disabilities. So that's a new thing for this election cycle.
Okay. All right, great. what do you know? You handle civil rights and voting rights. So what do you tell people in terms of voting rights?
One of the most important things that I focus on is the right to assistance, the right to have help with marking the ballot. So if a person has trouble marking a ballot for a disability-related reason, they have a right to have help, and they can get help by bringing the assistant of their choice. So they can bring a trusted family member or friend. There is a rule that you cannot bring someone from your employer or your union. So if a person does need assistance, they would bring the helper with them, and both individuals would have to sign a piece of paper saying, I'm not from your union or your boss. But otherwise, a person can bring someone to help them to mark the ballot. I also emphasize that voters can get assistance from a pair of poll workers if they don't want to bring someone from their family.
When you say a pair of poll workers, do you mean that it would actually be two poll workers?
It would be. It's
Okay.
called a bipartisan pair, and the reason for that is that we want security. We want to make sure that the ballot is being marked properly. So the poll workers, the pair of them, are there to ensure that it's not just a one person who is assisting the voter to mark the ballot. And then again, the third way to get assistance is to use that technology that's now available.
The express vote?
The express vote.
The express vote,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I learned something new today. That's fantastic. Do you see any trends? Now, so you work for Disability Rights Rhode Island, and obviously the elections actually come more than once every 2 years. There's local elections all the time. Do you see any trends in questions or complaints that the office receives?
What I see, there are a couple of things that I see a lot of. Getting out into the community, there's misunderstanding around voting and guardianship. So if a person has a legal guardian, sometimes either the guardian or the person who has a guardian, called the ward, there can be questions about whether the person is allowed to vote. So in Rhode Island, a person retains their right to vote unless there is a written court order which states you cannot vote. You do not have the ability to vote. So there would have had, the issue has to be addressed in a hearing. You don't lose the right to vote without having it be addressed. So just having a guardian does not mean that you've lost the right to vote unless it's in the order and it was addressed.
Okay, so somebody has a guardian. They're an adult with a guardian, still has the right to vote unless in that court order it says you do not have the right to vote.
Correct.
Now, this comes up because, my understanding, the application to vote has a question on it which trips people up. Is that correct?
Yes. The question on the voter registration form says you have to affirm. So you have to affirm that you're a citizen. You have to affirm that you're 18. You have to affirm that you're not incarcerated. And you have to affirm that you have not been judged mentally incompetent to vote by a court of law.
Okay.
So sometimes people look at that and they just think, oh, I have a guardianship, what does this mean? But it's actually pretty specific. You have to be judged mentally incompetent to vote by a court of law.
Okay. So specifically to vote, that's the important thing. Is
exactly.
It's not just you have guardian, if somebody has guardianship, it's that you cannot vote by a judge in an order.
And the reason for that is that voting is considered to be one of these prized rights that you cannot lose it without a high degree of due process, right? Okay. So and to bring this home for people as an example, I'll say, look, the state could take away my driver's license, but if they're going to do that, they assess my ability to drive before they do that. And so similarly with voting, we're not going to take away a person's right to vote unless there's been a hearing with evidence and assessment about the ability to vote. And really, the experts in this area will say that people should retain the right to vote as long as they can articulate a desire to participate in voting. So if they have a basic understanding of what it is and they want to participate, then they should retain the right to vote.
And you said kind of indicate a desire to participate. So that would not have to be a verbal indication, correct? They wouldn't have to say, I want to vote. They could just...
For example, I've worked with patients in a hospital who have medical conditions where they have to communicate through blinking. That's a nonverbal communication. You can use boards to spell things out. So it's really, if the person can express with accommodations or not the desire to vote, then they should be able to vote.
Okay, fantastic. Before we kind of wrap up, is there anything either of you would like to add to the conversation that we've had so far?
I do want to make sure we just remind everybody that they can submit their mail ballot applications by October 18th. And then also early voting is going to start on October 19th. So just want to make sure everybody is aware of that, so you can make your plan to vote.
Mail ballots by October 18th.
Correct.
What happens if you have a mail ballot and it's now October 19th? You've missed.
And actually, let me clarify my words too. Mail ballot applications are due by October 18th.
Okay.
If you fail to submit your mail ballot application by October 18th, luckily for you, early voting will start on October 19th. So you'll be able to just go right in to City Hall or Town Hall and vote early in person.
Okay.
Yeah. And, I do want to also just thank our Board of Elections, who was very helpful in helping get this whole bill together and get it passed. They opened up many tours for us as legislators to walk through and check out the process. They're also welcome to the public if anybody would ever like to go and see how the Board of Elections operates. They're able to do so. So I would be remiss if I didn't also give them a shout out.
Oh, that's fantastic. So
Yeah.
If somebody wants to kind of get a better understanding of how the vote works, how ballots are collected, how they're counted, they could actually go to the Board of Elections.
Correct.
And they'll give them a tour and give them all that information.
Bob Raposa is very friendly. He's very approachable and he's very knowledgeable. So yes, he's all about making sure everybody knows how the process works and feels good about it.
Okay, and each city and town has its own board of canvassers, right? Which is like a mini board of elections.
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of, not really, but
Yeah.
sort of. I'm sure people could also go to their own town and talk to their board of canvassers if they have questions or want additional information as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
If somebody does have an issue, though, either before the election, on election day, or after the election, can they contact you? And if they can, or
Yes.
you or Disability Rights Rhode Island, not necessarily you directly, but
Right.
how would they do that?
Absolutely. So we have a year-round hotline, and we answer questions all the time. So if anyone has a question about anything that we brought up today, or their own situation in terms of voting, whether they need accommodations, or just to talk through, have I missed the mail ballot thing. They can call Disability Rights Rhode Island. Just Google us. Our phone number is 831-3150, but it's on our website. So we help people with their questions or refer them if it's not in our area. But I would also, in terms of praising the Board of Elections, I would say that the Secretary of State's Elections Division are wonderful as well. And so between your city and town, the Secretary of State's office, the Board of Elections, or my office, you can absolutely get your questions answered. And we hope that people will really get engaged with voting.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, the Secretary of State's office, it was in the Let Rhode Island Vote Act, does have a hotline now, and it's multilingual. So whatever language the voter is most comfortable with, they can call this hotline, ask their questions about voting, and get some answers. So Kate, thank you for bringing that up. That was a very good point.
So questions, obviously, ahead of time, how do I get a ballot? They can call for that. What if they had a complaint? I couldn't access my polling place. I'm in a wheelchair and I couldn't get through a door, or the express vote. Hopefully,
vote. Okay.
Hopefully they're new, so they're still working. I know the old automarks had their issues, but say one of them wasn't working. Is that a complaint that can go to?
That's really up our alley. So the Governor's Commission on Disabilities, which is a state agency, Disability Rights Rhode Island, and the Board of Elections worked together in this leading up to the election to review polling places. So polling places should be accessible, but mistakes do happen. And I was at a polling place in September where the wrong door was set up, and there were stairs leading to the polling place, which is not something that we should see. So on election day, if someone encounters a barrier to voting, they can call Disability Rights Rhode Island, and we are available all day and resolving problems on the day if possible. So if there's an access issue, I will be in touch with the Board of Elections directly to their staff, identifying what the issue is and looking to get it resolved. If someone feels as if their rights have been violated in some way, there is a complaint process, an administrative complaint process with the Board of Elections.
Right.
And a person could call our office to learn more about that. And depending on the issue, we might be willing to assist someone with filing a complaint.
Okay, great. So it sounds like no matter where they go, Board of Elections, Secretary of State, Governor's Commission, Disability Rights Rhode Island, either something that office could handle, or at least they could point you to the right office to go
Yes.
to, right? So on that note, could we please get your contact information, the Disability Rights Rhode Island contact information one more time for the public,
Yes.
so they know how to get in touch with you?
It's Disability Rights Rhode Island, and the number is 401-831-3150.
Okay. If somebody needed to get in touch with you, either for questions about this or for constituent purposes, is there a way they could get in touch with you, Rep. Kazarian?
There's too many ways to get in touch with me. No, I'm just kidding. I have my professional email, which is located on the State House website. You can look up my name, Katherine Kazarian, and then click contact. You can also check out my website, katherinekazarian.com, or email me at katherine.kazarian@gmail.com. So plenty of different ways to get in touch.
All right, thank you both so much for being here. It was very informative. I'm hoping that this will help a lot of people be able to access their right to vote in the upcoming election and in elections beyond that. And I want to thank everybody for checking the show out. This was the Community Forum hosted by the Rhode Island Developmental Disabilities Council, and we'll see you next time. Bye.